Is it on? Okay. Let's call out the filmmakers, Paul Weiss and Andrew Miano.
Thanks, Chaz. Thank you.
And as you saw yesterday, we have a tradition of giving the golden thumb. So you get thumbs up from Roger, actually 2 thumbs, so you're getting 2 thumbs up. First,
I was so hoping last night when I saw you give one to Guillermo that there was one in our future as well. So I'm very excited.
So let me present this to Paul.
Thank you, thank you. Not to be hung like this. So.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Now, some people put them on the floor while they're talking or hold them, or we can take them backstage. What is your choice?
Seems disrespectful to put it on the floor, so...
Okay, I will take it backstage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to tell you, before I turn the stage over to Susan and to Todd, that watching this again is, I love this movie. It's and the last shot, I hope that you talk about that, because it's just the right way to end that movie.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks.
And all of the performances, every single one. It's not often that you see a film where all the supporting characters add so much to it. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Chaz. Thank you. Thanks, Nate.
We are moderating the panel will be Susan Watsina. Okay. Watsina. I've only known her for like 16 years, and we always call her Susan W. Yeah. Anyway, Susan Watsina is one of our film critics at RogerEbert.com, was at USA Today for nearly 30 years, okay? And we also have Professor Todd Rindelman from Seattle Pacifica University. They will conduct the Q&A. Thank you.
For some strange reason, I have seen this film 5 times. It's mostly
That is strange.
been for work, but it's been a pleasure too. And it's only 79 minutes, so
Yeah.
but never was a chore. But I have to say, I think I want to get a bumper sticker that says, "You need to be able to say screw you sometimes." I think that would work well. But I wanted to ask Andrew a question, because
Please.
you seem rather devoted to promoting the Weitz brothers and working with them. And I just wondered, you've worked with other people too, but I think primarily them. And I think there's probably some reason for that, and I just wonder what it was.
It's funny when Paul said 15. I was talking to his brother recently, and we realized it's actually getting close to 17. I've just been lucky. I always said to Paul, because we do make other movies with Paul and his brother as producers, but I have said to Paul many times over the years that if I get to retire being the partner to Paul and Chris Weitz and have made what I consider a bunch of great movies, that I would consider myself lucky. And I've also said a lot, when people in LA ask that question, it's, there hasn't been, no one's come to me with some other opportunity, and I don't mean that I want another opportunity.
Maybe there's someone in the audience.
Yes.
Who can free him from us.
There's just, we've become friends and partners and confidants, and I started in the agency business, which is obviously a different facet of things, but I like making movies with Paul and Chris Weitz. And again, whether they're directing or they're producing with me, I enjoy it.
Do you like one better than the other?
Depends on the day.
Just us.
Right
Okay.
now, Paul Weitz, I like that. No. They're both equally wonderful and different, and it's great to work with both of them, certainly.
Now, you've worked together on some of Paul's bigger films, too, and you've called this a labor of love, and I think, maybe, you made the decision for a reason to make smaller films. You made another movie, you did Little Fockers with Robert De Niro, but then you did a small film with him too, being Flynn. And I just want to know, many directors go from big to small. I mean, Guillermo del Toro has done it too, but what was it hard to get this off the ground, or was with Lily Tomlin, did it make it easier?
Well, the budget for this was $600,000, which was no doubt substantially less than the budget for Private Planes on Little Fockers. The big thing was getting over a mental hurdle in a number of ways, and I was in a good state for that because I felt maybe a little critical of some of my work. Not so much. Little Fockers was what it was. A friend of mine called it the lion tamer movie, and most of the lions were absolutely wonderful, and the occasional one mauls you. De Niro was one of the wonderful ones. I think both for me and Lily, it was, I write plays, and I'd somewhat bifurcated my creativity and put a certain amount of my heart into playwriting while I was making studio films. And there's other films that I really love, like Being Flynn, the one you mentioned, I really care for that film,
yeah.
And for the work that De Niro did in it. But this one was really close to home, and I had no idea if we could make a $600,000 film. I think we've learned, this is the 10th film I've directed, and I think we've learned a lot about production. In my case as a director, so much of it was what I don't need. I couldn't be shooting a scene that I wasn't going to use in the film because of the schedule, and no, this was a joy. I think Lily was quite wondering what the heck we were doing as well, except that so clearly, like once she agreed to do it, it was like watching a great baseball player take batting practice. Man, that performance is really incredible.
Yeah.
And she's, like, to me, but here's what I wanted to do, actually. All right. I'm actually going to just send a little video to Lily, if I may. Let's see here. Lily, I'm at the Roger Ebert Film Festival.
Hello,
And everybody just saw Grandma, and I was in the audience, and it was really fantastic. Thanks. Wow. All right. So now you get the gist of it, Lily. We love you. She's shooting right now, so wasn't able to be here, but I look forward to sending you this, and that worked out well. Thanks. Okay, thank you so much. That was great. She's going to love that.
Well directed, well received audience.
It's actually part of my next film. It's going to cost $0.
Is that what he does? He just compliments you, and that's it. But, I had the pleasure of talking to Lily for this, too, and she said that was her clothes and her necklace and her car.
Yeah. Well, it was,
so
yeah.
Where does the $600,000
Yeah, well, that's what you do. And there were two scenes shot in our offices. One was Marcia Gay Harden's office with the treadmill desk. My brother owns that treadmill desk, and I went up there. We went up there one day and looked in his office, and I called Marcia and I said, "Hey, how'd you feel about doing the scene on a treadmill desk?" And she said, "Sure. I don't know what that is, but okay."
She does physical humor very well.
She really does. Yeah, Marcia's great. That little bit where she wipes her underarms with a towel is very much her sense of humor. And then the clinic room where the doctor is shining the light in Lily's eyes, that was another room in our office. But in terms of Lily, yeah, one day I was going to go search for an old car, and I called Lily and I said, "What do you think? What kind of car do you think she'd drive? I'm looking for an old car with some character." And she said, "Well, why don't you come over here? There's one in the garage." And I believe Jane Wagner, her partner, had forbidden her from driving it because it's a terrifying car to drive. There's one or two scenes where it's actually me shot from behind in a bad wig. So I drove that car, and it's one of those cars where, like, you press the brake and then you cross your fingers. You better press it about a block before you want to stop. But Lily clearly has very strong calves, and she was able to handle it.
Well, one of the themes this year of the festival is, or two of them are diversity and women in film, and I think this has it all. And, you know, a lot of times, yes, please clap. Because it's sort of like a lady lasagna of talent. It's just like you go one more, and you're like, how all these amazing women and working so well together. And one thing, the fourth time I watched the film, I noticed that Judy Greer's mother is played by Judy Geeson. And I don't know if you know who she is, but if you love to serve with love like I do, she was the young woman, student, who danced with Sidney Poitier and had a crush on him. And I mean, even down to that level, you know, and she was wonderful. But, I just so admire how well you cast this. And even having a trans actress playing a trans person is important to people.
Yeah, which is Laverne Cox, who's a wonderful actress and activist.
Yeah.
Thank you. But you can see the connection with American Pie. It's a direct, I'm just kidding. Yeah, thanks. We were very lucky. I think working with Lily appealed to people, and I think the roles appealed to people. Yeah, Laverne was one of the only people who we hadn't worked with before who was in the film.
Yeah, but I think really the surprising thing is I think I timed it to 11 minutes. The scene with Sam and Lily is like a mini movie of its own. And and he makes corn so sexy, doesn't he? I mean, I want that corn now. But now that wasn't one shot because they were moving around and everything, but it almost felt that way because it was so intense and just the emotions they went through were amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, when I started writing that sequence, I didn't know what their story was. He was sort of saying these menacing things, and it almost felt to me like a Pinter play that I was stepping into. Like the thing he says about when you smile, you're showing your skeleton.
Yeah.
That came up first, and then as I was working on it, I understood why she was there, which was their history.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that it was really great for me to have Lily as an ally in that. You know, I asked Lily, I said, do you believe this character would have been involved with a man at a certain point of her life?
Yeah.
And if she had said, no, I don't believe that, then it would have been really hard for me to put into the movie. And then that's super exciting. We had this panel earlier where we were talking about aspects of empathy in film. And it's very tempting to talk about sort of the things you can control in film or your aspirations for what it means, but there's also a degree to which you're an audience as a filmmaker. You want to get to where you're an audience, actually. And then you know, and watching the two of them and where they went, there's a Hippocratic oath element to filmmaking, which is that when people are finding things and doing things that are exciting, you don't want to harm them. Like your first precept is do no harm to the actor's performance. You know, at a certain point in that, I went up to Sam and I was going to give him a note. And as I approached him, he said, I know, I'm not going to do a bad Sam Elliott imitation. You're going to tell me to tone it down, don't show as much. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. I can't remember. I think it was I don't remember what the note was, but it certainly wasn't that. Some of that is simply being in the right shot while they're doing those performances.
Mm-hmm. I'll let you.
Yeah, well, along with that, it's so comforting to see Sam Elliott just appear in the film, and yet it becomes so raw. That seems to be the emotional heart of the movie, is the exchange between the two of them. It reminded me of the character that he played in Mask almost 30 years later, the fellow that was trying to get Cher to settle down. Did you write the role for him as well as Miss Tomlin?
I didn't write it for him, but my brother had worked with him, and after I wrote it, the idea of Sam came up, and that was the first and only person it was sent to. And my brother worked with him on a film called Golden Compass, and so he called up Sam and asked if he'd read it. The thing about Sam is, if I was thinking of any performance, it was Mask, which is a really beautiful, emotional performance. Like he's clearly sort of a man's man, but is sitting on a well of emotion. And with this role, the part where the character has his cards close to the vest had to work first off. And I felt that Sam's bearing was going to be beneficial to that, as opposed to somebody you walk in and you think, oh, that's really empathetic, or a person who's going to show me their emotions from the get-go. So that was just damn good luck. And then he had an interesting chemistry with Lily.
I thought there was an interesting parallel as well. There's a moment in the film when Lily Tomlin's character becomes frustrated that her granddaughter doesn't know who Betty Friedan is. And when I teach in my film classes, many young people don't know who Lily Tomlin is. That's true. So I try to show clips from 9 to 5 or All of Me because they really aren't aware of her. And so thank you for this film, because this grandmother's really doing something about that, I think. Yeah.
Well, it was, the first lead role she's had in a movie in 27 years. This came out last year, and her last one was Big Business. And, she's been doing TV and stuff, but you were smart enough to figure, let's get her while the getting's good here.
Well, the night that we wrapped at about, 2 or 3 a.m. I managed my time badly that night, and we ended up quite late. And then that very day, she went and did her one-woman show, which is like 2 hours of her up on stage, like running around and showing clips from her from her history, but also it's really just her holding the stage, and it blew my mind. I sat there in the audience that night, and the fact that she was able to go, having just shot until 2, 3 a.m. and hold the stage, she's incredible, and her act actually is quite edgy and transgressive, and I love that she doesn't want people to take ownership of her. What I mean by that is, for instance, I don't want to get into it's just part of her personality, but she was offered the cover of Time magazine in the 70s if she would come out as gay on the cover of Time magazine. And she said, no, I don't want to do that. She wasn't necessarily hiding anything, but she said, if I'm on the cover, I want it to be for something else. And then 2 years later, she's on the cover of Time magazine as the Queen of Comedy. So she's a tough cookie.
And at a certain point, after I got over the joy of seeing Lily Tomlin and everybody else acting, I realized how well written this movie is. And I think, and it's hard to write lines that make you laugh that don't sound like jokes, and I think you made them come from the characters. And, it's a very moving film, but the humor is just spot on, and it says something the way that her granddaughter picks up things from her. And when we talked before, you said you had done male mentoring movies, but this was your first female mentoring. And I think you were maybe even better at that. So.
Thanks a lot. In terms of the editing process, there wasn't much that was cut out, but if anything was cut out, it was, if anything felt like it was pushing for a joke where, and in any way selling out the character, I tried to get rid of that.
But another thing I told you is I went to the set of American Wedding. We talked for that. But I went back and watched American Pie again. I realized if you look at that movie, that it is a really good movie, despite the pastry abuse. And it's much more than that. But if you watch the women in that film, they're far more enlightened, centered people than the guys in the film. And I think, some people have noted that, but I think if you watch it, a lot of actresses, that was their discovery role in that film, and there was a reason for that.
I know that when my brother and I were going in, and we directed that, Adam Hers wrote it, when we went in to talk with the studio about it, we had a specific angle on it, which was that we were going to make the film for girls as opposed to boys, because at the time there was this myth that only boys would go see movies again and again and again, but Titanic had just come out. Anyway, so it was the only way we could do it in the first place, and it's not perfect in this regard for sure, but there is, I think, more respect for women in that movie than one thinks of in terms of that genre. And the women are in positions of control, and there's not an invalidation of female sexuality in it, for what that's worth.
Were there particular challenges involved in creating a movie with a protagonist that so many of the other characters experience as being mean or short-tempered?
Well, I think that was, it's really funny because when I first brought Lily the script, we started going through it, and we had months to go through it, every beat. And she said, I don't really understand the character's anger. Why is she so angry? What's with this temper that she has? And then she looked at me and said, yeah, I know, you've seen the video of me yelling at David O. Russell, which is, some of you might have seen it. There's a famous, somebody took a video of a fight, an on-set fight between David O. Russell and Lily where she's really chewing him out. The key thing actually was going through every beat and showing what she was angry about. And that's sort of where that line, I don't have an anger problem, I have an asshole problem, comes from. So I had to go through and say, okay, here's what she's angry about here, here's what she's angry about there. And in terms of language, it was kind of funny because when she first read it, she said, does the character have to swear so much? She's meant to be a literary type, and I'm not sure about this language. So I actually pulled back on the swearing in the film, and while there was very little improvisation during shooting, a lot of that swearing is Lily's improv in the moment. She's a pretty hair-raising practitioner of the curse word.
And I think even more than maybe last year, the issue of abortion is a very divisive one now, and if always. And I think, for me, I thought you handled it rather thoughtfully, and you went through the process of the pros and cons and the price you pay, what you won't forget it. It's not done without thought here and caring. And it's, a difficult decision.
Thanks. I mean, I'm not really sure why this movie came to me, but it did. And then to me, the challenge was to not feel like I was being fake about it. Obviously, if you take one tiny inch away step outside of just looking at it as a movie about characters, it's touching upon things that people are extremely passionate about. Like I put in a line there where she says, have you thought about it? Because it's something you'll probably think about at some point every day for the rest of your life. You could look at that from a feminist perspective and say, I don't approve of that line. Now, I don't have her say whether you think about it in terms of sadness or in terms of that was a decision I had to make for my life, and maybe the child I have now wouldn't be born if I hadn't done that thing. So even, clearly it's a pro-choice stance in that it's humanizing the characters, but also very important to me to have everything be personal to all the characters so that Sam Elliott's character has his own angle, which you don't expect, and his own experience with it. I just think that so often when it's something that is an issue that people are dealing with in terms of politics, that it's almost impossible to keep the humanity of the people involved in mind, and that's just happened to be how what I was aspiring to.
Chaz had mentioned the forcefulness of the final image with her walking down the street. Is that, yeah? Did you know you wanted to end with that particular image?
Yeah, that was, I had that image in mind from the get-go. I knew that in order to do the film properly, I've done films where every shot was written, essentially. There was a script, and then there was a shot list of all the shots I was going to do. In this one, I needed to feel like I was going to be able to go with the characters. So some of this was not written, but that shot ahead of time was something I had in mind. And also the idea that you wouldn't really hear a song used in that way until the end. The scene in the cab where Lily is saying goodbye to Violet in a way, and she's not crying there, she's laughing and remembering things that Violet had made her laugh about. And that to me was so the essence of something, and such a great decision on Lily's part. The saddest she getting away is when she's saying goodbye to that car, So I think that image, to some degree, you could say it has something to do with death, although also there's a poet, Eileen Miles, who's referred to in the movie. And when she saw the movie, she said, "I love that because it's like a gunslinger walking up into the distance." So there's an element of that. I was trying to restrain myself from a certain type of shot so that would have effect at the end.
So I think maybe we should take some questions from the audience. How are we doing this? There's nobody with microphones. Oh. All right. I'll try to hear you.
So what inspired?
Oh, there. They're coming. They're coming. I'm sorry. Great.
I have a question here over to your left.
Sorry, dude.
What inspired you on some of your casting choices?
Well, the question was, what inspired us on the casting choices? Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, on the kid, meaning Julia Garner, she was someone who'd been introduced to me actually on a different film that didn't end up happening. And when we were putting this movie together, Paul received a phone call from her agent, and you met her in New York, and it just felt right? I mean, it was a very interesting. She made this movie called Electric Children, which is a wonderful, wonderful little film that, strangely enough, also deals with a pregnancy, slightly through sort of immaculate conception of an audio cassette. And she's absolutely wonderful in this film, which Paul also watched. And I met with her in New York, and I mean, is it right to say she felt right? She was just.
Yeah, I mean, part of my preparation for making this was watching very, very low-budget films over the course of a year and a half, and one of them was Electric Children. And Lily, so I flew Julia in to meet Lily, and Lily was very anxious because she said, "Oh, please don't make her feel that I'm determining whether she's going to be in the movie." And they met, and Lily just really liked her and cared for her and thought that there wasn't any aspect of careerism or anything to her. She's a little bit set off in time. Like to me, like her look is a little bit like a 1920s film star, like Jean Harlow or something. Look, this was a situation where I didn't have to explain myself to anybody. I'm happy to explain. I'm happy to yap about choices, but there wasn't any pushback or anything. This was such a low-budget movie that it's not like anybody was going to push me to cast somebody I didn't want to cast. So.
Question to your left.
Hi. I'm wondering what kind of research you did in terms of what it's like to go to a clinic. Did you interview people? How did you find out? How did you decide what kind of protesters you wanted there? Because I know it's very site-specific, so if you could talk about that, that would be great.
Sure. In terms of the clinic, look, statistically, you don't have to go far to talk to somebody who's had to make a decision about whether to terminate a pregnancy, because if you believe certain statistics, it's something like 30% of women of a certain age have had some experience like this. So look, whether it be somebody who I know who might have had one or who drove somebody to have one, I'm not a woman, and there were various aspects of this film that other people were going to know more about than I did. For instance, the aspect of Elle's history. Lily was going to know more about that than I. Again, I just wanted to be really accurate and not be politically correct about it, and at the same time, just be as close to being honest as I felt that I could. I did a lot of research, for sure. Look, some of that was talking about Lily's character being of a certain age, and if one did have that procedure at that age, what was one's experience going to be? How would it differ from now? In terms of the protester, I wrote that scene first, and I was having a really hard time with that scene because I'd seen a lot of movies where there had been scenes where there was abortion protesters, whether it be Juno or Citizen Ruth. So there was a lot that I didn't want to repeat. Also, this is a low-budget film, and I thought the specificity of it just being two people, one of whom was a little girl who socks Lily in the face, was something that I hadn't quite seen before. And I really like the idea of Lily as her own worst enemy and adversary. And finally, at the time when she's ready to calmly talk about peace and how things don't have to have conflict, that's when she gets punched. And then later she says it was a karma boomerang. So that was some, look, one of our producers was a wonderful independent film producer named Danielle Renfrew. And when she read the script first, she said, I think this is good. I think your scene, which was a different scene at the time at the clinic, the scene with the protesters is not very good. And I listened to her, and I kept trying, so.
I like the non-brass knuckles.
Oh, yeah, we put some wood sounds in there. They were meant to be wooden beads, and they were foam, so that Lily wouldn't actually get hurt. And we had a pad beneath Lily, so when she fell, she didn't hopefully hurt herself.
Nice touch. Anyone else?
Question in the balcony, a bit to your right.
Hi.
Hi. So one of the first things I noticed in the movie was that Sage said, I made the appointment for tonight. It has to be this evening at 5:45. And through the whole movie, I guess the question in the back of my head was, did it have to be that night? Was it because in her mind, for some reason my impression was that she had only just missed her period and she was really early on. Then later it was 10 weeks, and I was wondering if it was a personal decision that's when it had to be for her. If it was a state decision, then that was hinted at with the, the counseling that some people have to go through if she had to go do a first appointment thing or not. And I guess part two of this is I appreciate how nuanced the political side of it and the moral side of it was. I wonder how much that had to do with production and the budget and how this film was distributed. So it's my two-part question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The first part of it, in terms of why she wants to get it done now, is I think that once she knew she was pregnant, once she had made a decision about what she was going to do, every minute that went by made that decision harder and more painful. So that's why she wants to get it done as soon as possible. In terms of the aspect of it, thank you for calling it nuanced, aspect of the discussion of the political aspect of it. Yeah, for sure. Like I really enjoy the films that have been done where a character decides not to go this route in terms of an unintended pregnancy. I brought up Knocked Up and Juno, and I don't think I would have been able to make a film about somebody making this decision going a conventional studio route. The entree into this was not, I want to make a statement about political aspects. Look, the big statement here is not pausing to make a big statement about Elle's sexuality. It's not pausing to make a big statement about her age. There are a lot of isms that it's dealing with. But the big implication is these are humans, and it's reductive to talk about them in terms of how they're categorized. So this is a really, there's various levels of politics in this. Look, there's a transgender character. There's no moment where anybody says, "Oh, that character is transgender," or where she says, "I'm transgender." She's a friend of Elle, and in our backstory, we said that she was that Elle's deceased partner, Violet, was a mentor to her. It's also just about grieving to me. Like, how do you get past loss in terms of Elle with her, with Violet? How do you get over the guilt? Because when you get past a loss, there's guilt involved. Yeah.
I've got a question in center.
Hi, I just want to say thank you very much again for a great movie, very as you mentioned, nuanced emotionally. And I noticed one of the things that you're doing with that too is the handheld camera work, particularly in that last scene. And could you talk a little bit about your choices with that kind of camera work that add to the kind of immediate intimacy of the movie?
Thank you. The camera, the cinematographer is a guy named Toby Datum. He's German, and he did a film called Smashed, which I really enjoyed. And that film can be a little disorienting because he describes it as there's like a bungee cord in between the actor and him. I do feel like with a certain kind of very bare bones filmmaking, the way that it is appropriate is if the film feels voyeuristic or like you're seeing something that you wouldn't normally be seeing, is like extremely intimate. Look, it's a relief to me that like, I don't know, I'm sure there's people who might feel this way. I understand it, but like, seeing it projected on a big screen, which I've now seen it numerous times, I was worried it was going to make people nauseous, because I don't tend to use handheld camera that much. He's a really good operator, because, if the film had just been a little bit more like this, I think it wouldn't have worked. He used not a Steadicam, but he's about 6'6", Toby. So he uses a bungee rig, which is, he attaches this thing to his back, and there's a hook going over his head, and then there's a bungee which the camera hangs from, so that he can hold the camera here, or else he'd be shooting down on everybody because he's so tall. And I think that's fairly common, but I hadn't seen anybody use it before, just personally. Look, he's talented, and also like he helped in another way, which is that he lit rooms and spaces so that there was no turnaround time, basically, or extremely little, which is fantastic, because the actors can just get to it. If you're like, I feel like I want to do something, this actor has now done this, and I already shot that side, can I go around and have the other actor respond to that? It'd be no problem with Toby. He also shoots the show that I do, Mozart in the Jungle, which is oftentimes more glossy than this. He's really talented, and he helped make this possible. On the first day, it actually freaked me out because I was trying to figure out where I was and who these characters were, and the initial breakup was the first thing we shot. And so we shot for a little bit, and I was like, okay, now there's going to be time to move the lights so I can think what the hell I'm doing. And he said, okay, I'm ready to go. And I was like, God, I wish I got more sleep last night. But it's due to him.
Question just to your left.
Hi. I want to first say thank you for making a film with LGBT and abortion just portrayed as sort of in the normal flow of life. I appreciated that. But my question is, it's very heavy on dialogue. It's a conversational movie, and I mean that as a compliment. And I wondered, how do you decide how often to inject the moments of humor, or how do you make sure that a movie that's so heavily conversational doesn't go dry? And it didn't. I loved your film. I'm just wondering how.
So much of that is the actors, Look, clearly anything is possible cinematically nowadays. It's no longer necessarily a great advantage if you can do the greatest special effect ever, because so many films have the greatest special effects ever. I did think, when I first sent this to my agents, who were very cool, they said to me, thanks for letting us read this, do you think it could be a play? And I really had to answer that question. They were saying that more for career reasons. But I thought, no, because in a play, I can't decide where there's a close-up. I can't have, the camera following somebody. I kind of gave myself license to let the characters speak and do the work for me, and then just shape it, essentially. So.
There was also something interesting, I think, that when we were making the film and when Paul was in editorial is often, the editor and Paul in a dark room for a long time. And then sometimes you'll screen the movie for friends or family or for a small group of people. And that did happen on this film, but what was interesting, there was no time where we screened it really for more than a handful of people. And through the finishing of the movie, we never saw it I think, more than projected once on still a rather small screen. And then we got to Sundance and screened it in their biggest theater there. We were their closing night film, and it was 1,300 people. And it's very, very nerve-wracking, as one would expect. And I think you said it best when you said the movie played funnier than any movie of yours since American Pie. And not that you haven't made other comedies that have also played very funny, but there was something
That's
really...
the problem.
But there was something really interesting about that because we hadn't seen it yet. We hadn't seen it in front of a live audience like yourselves. And I mean, I have to say, it was an incredible experience. I mean, it was pretty amazing to see it, to see it work that way. We knew it did, but we didn't know how it was going to be received. And for having it be such a movie about so many different things, it just played so wonderfully. And I think that's a testament to everyone and to yourself.
So one last question.
We have a question from the center of the balcony.
Thank you very much for the film and for being here. Roger Ebert once wrote a review where he said of supporting characters, apparently in Britain you can just stick your head out the door and have all the character actors you want. I was struck in this film that you had every character seem perfect to me. All the supporting roles were just perfect. Is that easy? It seems like it would be almost impossible.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think back to the supporting characters in Preston Sturges films or Ernst Lubitsch films and how much of the movie they carry. I think that oftentimes, especially in comedies, the temptation during the editing process, as you're screening it and as a studio seeing it, is to take away anything that feels non-essential. So everything is put into that star comedic person's role. I mean, this is sort of the structure of this is the two of them are together, but there's little sort of stations that they hit. And I do think that one thing that was really beneficial is if I was to, not that I would be tempted to do this in the first place, but to diminish Sam's role or Laverne's or anybody's in a way, it was so much part of the fabric of Lily's performance, etc. And also, I mean, this is look. Here's the other thing: is the film's 79 minutes long. I think the script was 82 pages long. Most scripts are 120 pages. So, you think, oh, great, I'll get to shoot stuff and then see if it works or not. Well, the problem with that is you end up with stuff that does work, and then you have to cut it because you don't want to overstay your welcome, or at least I don't personally. It's probably something I should maybe get over. But in this case, it was exactly, basically what I had written. So I wasn't in a situation where, for pragmatic reasons, I had to chop down somebody's character. Sam's performance was really fantastic. So layered. And also everybody was doing it for the right reason. Nobody was doing it for money, that's for sure.
Well, I may see the movie a sixth time. I don't know.
Give yourself a break.
But I do appreciate you doing this. And maybe on Amazon we might see some movies, or no? You have a production deal.
Well, that's just we have a television deal with Amazon because I do the show
TV.
Mozart in the Jungle. Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, we don't have a film deal with them. But.
Do you have any films in mind now?
Yeah, I've been for quite a while doing an adaptation of a novel called Bel Canto, which, as with any excellent novel, one worries about doing justice to it. But that might be the next one. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both.
Thank
so
you,
much.
thank you, everybody,
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Susan.